Great rewards don't wait, so why should you? Through the Invigor Book and Buy Grower program, you could earn a $30 per bag rebate when you book all of your Invigor hybrid canola by November 14th. Talk to your retailer. Terms and conditions apply.
I'm Shaun Haney, and this is RealAg on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. RealAg on the Weekend starts now. Welcome to RealAg on the Weekend. I'm your host, Shaun Haney of RealAgriculture.com. Hey, I had a couple of weeks where I wasn't in the host seat. Lindsay Smith from Real Agriculture did a fantastic job of filling in and keeping you up to date on all things in agriculture. But I'm glad to be back, and we got a great show lined up for you here today as well. We got Jake Leguee. He is chair of Sask Wheat. He's a farmer from Fillmore, Saskatchewan, and they've got some Saskatchewan farm groups have got some pretty strong thoughts, and I tend to agree with them on increasing data transparency when it comes to Canadian grain and oilseed exports and getting a little bit more in line with the U.S. and the EU. We're also going to hear from Greg Bartley. He's with Pulse Canada. He's going to talk about connecting global demand to on-farm decisions when it comes to pulses. Ashley Bruner will be with us from the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity, and also Krissy Fiddler from AgriTrade that is happening this upcoming week in Red Deer. That's a sign that winter meeting season is upon us. We've hit AgriTrade, people. Can you believe it? Hey, if you have any feedback on today's show, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also call or text. You can also text the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Or, of course, you can also find Real Agriculture across all of the different social media platforms. Let's get to my conversation with Jake Leguee, chair of Sask Wheat, also farmer from Fillmore, Saskatchewan. Well, Sask Wheat, Sask Crops, which is all the crop commissions in Saskatchewan working on the grains oilseed side, working together, and APAS put out a press release talking about the need for increased transparency when it comes to grain export reporting. What needs to happen here?
Well, I mean, we've been operating in Canada at a significant information asymmetry for a long time. They've rectified this in a lot of other countries. The United States is a good example, but it's also been done in the European Union. The grain companies have access to quite a bit of data because they're making the sales. As grain companies get larger and consolidate more, they're going to be able to grow that advantage. As farmers, we just don't know. We just don't know where our stuff is going until quite some time after, a month or more. And even then, we still lack a lot of detail that you would get if you were a farmer in the United States.
Yeah.
So that's something that they've dealt with for a long time down there, and it seems to be working quite well. Farmers have access to export sales reporting down there, and that helps them make better decisions. Better information, in all cases, should help us make better decisions. And that's what we believe will happen if we can enact some sort of an export sales reporting program. So we started on this several years ago. It was a long-standing request of farmers from all across Saskatchewan. So what we were trying to figure out is, okay, what would this look like and how would it actually work? So we commissioned a report by Mercantile Consulting with a variety of other crop commissions here in Saskatchewan, along with APAS, to have a good look at this and try to figure out what would be the benefits, how would it work, and then we can figure out what exactly it is that we're asking for.
Yeah. Now, look at this week. Yesterday, I get to work and I'm scanning through some of the grain marketing sites and people I typically try to listen to. China buys 3 cargoes. Right. It's like in the moment. It's real. It's transparency of data. We don't have that necessarily in Canada. So I see the upside here. What's the opposition to this? What is the pushback to having more transparency when it comes to export sales data?
Well, the pushback that we've received so far has come from the exporter side. They feel that it would impact their competitiveness. That would put too much information out there and could damage their ability to, be successful, I guess, in buying grain from farmers at the best price possible for them, which I understand. But at the same time, this is working in other countries. You have a lot of grain companies that are doing just fine in the United States and the European Union. So their concerns over this, I think, don't match reality from what we're seeing in other places, in other jurisdictions. So I think that we need to find a way forward so that we can figure out a system that works. Because like I said, we've seen it work elsewhere.
Yeah, we have the same thing when it comes to the beef industry. There's no published box beef price, for example, from Canada. We rely on the U.S. number and extrapolate. And probably they're, move in sort of tandem, but I again don't understand why we can't, here's what the Canadian price was, and we're just professional extrapolators of U.S. data. Do you think that there's momentum behind this request, Jake, or are you screaming into the void?
Well, it's always difficult to say. Farmers have been asking for this for a long time, but does that mean that our message is going to resonate? It's hard to say for sure. We know that the benefits are significant. The report that Mercantile helped us put together on this was showing about a $56.5 million benefit annually for producers. And we know that that's a very conservative number. That's really trying to model out what it would look like for a Saskatchewan farm versus a North Dakota farm and how they might be able to take advantage of better basis pricing. But that's really not looking at maybe you change your crop mix a little bit this year, because you can see some sales that have gone through that kind of might have been a bit of a surprise to the market, but you can see it so much faster. So I think that there's tremendous benefits here. So the thing that we need to do is get that information out there, and whether, we need a little bit of help from our governments, both federal and provincial, I don't know. But I guess our hope is that by getting a little bit more information out into the marketplace here, the grain companies will come around on this and see that this is something that the industry needs.
Jake, is there any opportunity to do an interim step where we do a pilot project on one of the crop types, or is that possible to kind of prove that, hey, we'll have an industry at the other side of this? This isn't like doomsday if we were to do this?
Well, that's a good point, Shaun. I mean, pilot projects have worked in a lot of cases, like interswitching. We've done pilot projects on that. The trouble is converting that into a long-term actual change. We're still struggling with interswitching to see that actually happen. Yeah. So pilot projects are no guarantee that it will actually change over, but we're never against giving something a try and seeing how it works, if that might help, make this transition actually happen.
Yeah, when Mercantile did their research, did they look across all crop types in Saskatchewan, or just focusing on pulses, canola, and wheat?
Yeah, I mean, what the ask is would be to have this type of reporting for all the major crops. So wheat, durum, barley, oats, canola, soybeans, corn, peas, lentils. Once you start getting into the really small crops, it probably does get a little bit more challenging, but on those major crops, it just makes sense.
That was Jake Leguee. He is chair of Sask Wheat, as well as farmer from Fillmore, Saskatchewan, representing APAS and Sask Crops. What they're asking for is not crazy, because we already see it in other jurisdictions. We see it in the U.S. We see it in the EU. And but there's significant pushback from the Canadian grain industry. So, you know what? Send me your thoughts. 855-776-6147. Let's take a break. We're back with more of RealAg on the Weekend right after this.
AgriTrade Equipment Expo, November 5th to 7th at Westerner Park in Red Deer. Discover the latest ag innovations, equipment, and technology. Get your tickets now at agri-trade.com.
If you're serious about agriculture, RealAg's got you covered.
For over 10 years, we've listened to and shared what producers have to say about everything from policy to agronomy from coast to coast.
Keep up with the latest in Canadian agriculture at RealAgriculture.com through daily newsletters, and check out our YouTube channel.
Thanks for joining us in the RealAg community as we continue to cover and serve North American agriculture.
Hi, I'm Bruner Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by Mazik Seeds and Lalamon Plant Care.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
For any of the crops that we grow on the Western Canadian prairies, I think it's always important to have a firm understanding of where those crops are ending up. Listen, it just doesn't end. You just don't drop it off the grain terminal, and it's like, yeah, whatever, right? It's important to know where the customers are, and also work some of that demand back to making decisions. And this can be a little bit difficult in pulses because we have less info out there. There's less pulses grown in the world than something like, say, corn, where there's an abundance of information. Amber Bell from Real Agriculture on a recent Pulse School episode that is brought to you by BASF Canada had a chance to talk to Greg Bartley, who is with Pulse Canada, about this very topic. Here they are.
From a high level, or if we take a look at, from the growing season, our markets were performing pretty good right off the combine. We saw decent movement, especially for yellow peas. But I'd say it's definitely softened, a lot since that harvest finished. If we take a kind of a wide look at things, China and India are our two largest markets for the pulses. Unfortunately for China, there's 100% duty on yellow peas, which essentially closed that market. So we're working very hard to address that issue. And then India, a bit better there. We have about a 11% duty on lentils, which still allows us to serve that market, which is good. And then for yellow peas, it continues to be duty free, and that restriction, or those lack of restrictions, is out until March 2026. So from a high level, we saw that decent movement right from the combine, but things have definitely slowed down a bit, due to the supply and prices and things like that.
So what are some of those things that the other countries are actually looking for when it comes to purchasing from Canada?
I think they're looking, whether it's the supply issues, and I think price points too. I think there's a large supply of pulses in the global market. Canada's not the only one that has a good crop out there. And, I think that's weighing a bit, on the price point. So I think, they're looking for decent quality, pulses at a price point, that they're willing to pay for.
When it comes to what other countries are looking for, I know that you do a lot of work with Keep It Clean priorities. Now, how do those play into the global markets?
Yeah, so the Keep It Clean program is all about making sure that farmers have market-ready crops. So that's where we're trying to distill what our export requirements are and bring it back down to the farm level, so growers can make good on-farm decisions to make sure that at the end of the day our crops remain marketable. So a lot of the main focus, the things that farmers can have control of at the farm level can be things like pesticide or contaminant levels or mycotoxins, things like that. So that's a big focus of the Keep It Clean program and kind of what we're trying to deliver through that program.
So what are some of the things that growers should be double checking with their brokers before they spray or before they're delivering?
Yeah, so obviously we're in the fall now, so spraying's done, but I think things to look out for at this point, if you did happen to spray some products. We release a product advisory every year, and this kind of highlights the potential, products that we know where there's potential market access concerns. So from a pulse perspective, there's two or three that I think are worth highlighting. The first one is glufosinate ammonium as a desiccant. It's not allowed as a desiccant. We don't have MRLs in any of our export markets, and extremely important not to use that product. So for some reason that product was applied, you're going to face marketing restrictions, and we need to make sure that stays out of the supply chain. A second thing, new for this year, it's flunicimid, or that's the active ingredient for the insecticide product carbine, for aphid controlled lentils. We're communicating potential market access issues on green lentils into the European Union, and this is more just around uncertainty with the MRL there. So again, if it was applied this growing season, I think it's just need to make sure that when you're talking to your grain buyer, if that grain buyer is serving the EU market, you may run into a situation where they may not accept your product. There's other markets, where that emerald, there isn't an emerald concern with that product. So, there's potentially you just need to go find a different buyer. But it's super important, to have that conversation with the grain buyer if you did use that product to make sure that we're not, contributing to that emerald certainty in the EU. And then finally, glyphosate. We talk about glyphosate every year, and it's just making sure that, the product is applied correctly. So while there's could be potential market restrictions in terms of, commercial requirements, things like that. At the end of the day, if you use the product, according to label, correctly, got that application timing correct, and you have that conversation with the grain buyer, I don't think you'd have too many problems, marketing that grain with your exporter if you have that conversation early on.
Are there any new messaging priorities when it comes to Keep It Clean this year?
We try and keep when we strip down the messaging to Keep It Clean, it may seem high level, but I think that's by intent. Again, trying to make sure that we have those market ready crops. When you strip it down to things of, using only, acceptable pesticides only, registered products, you don't cause market, trade concerns, always read and follow the label, making sure that we're using the products, correctly, applying them correctly for application rate, timing, pre-harvest interval. That message doesn't change from year to year. It's a strong foundation. When you get into things like plant diseases, there could be market access things jump up in export markets. So you may see some tweaking in messaging throughout the growing season or different campaign years. I think the mycotoxins is one that's, we're seeing a bit more focus on in our export markets. So while there's nothing specific from a pulse perspective in that messaging, a lot of it relates to fusarium in wheat. I think there's going to be a greater attention, moving forward in bringing focus to mycotoxins, and that relates to proper storage as well. And then, deliver what you declare. It's a simple message, but it's just really understanding what those producer declarations are, and that you are meeting the requirements of the declaration. So it may seem like we're saying the same thing every year, but that's by intent. It's trying to keep it simple. The messages, apply year to year. So that remains the focus.
Right. Let's talk about pulse acres in general. Are we seeing shifts towards more pulse acres across Canada?
Yeah, if you look at the acres this year compared to last year, we're fairly steady, if anything, up a bit. Moving forward, I'd say pulses are definitely a strong component of the crop rotation, and I don't expect them to change, drastically one way or the other. But if we're gonna, forecast out to next year, I'm not going to speculate on that. I think there's too many variables out there. I don't think anyone has a good understanding of market trends right now of which way things could go one way or the other. It's definitely a challenging situation. So I'm hopeful they remain stable. I think they're a strong part of crop rotations. But as far as looking at acreage for next year, I don't have the answers.
That is perfectly fair. And where do you see the strongest growth in pulse types? Or where have you seen
growth in pulse types? Yeah, no, I see. I think our peas and lentils, obviously those are the main crops you grow, here in Western Canada. Chickpeas, there's been some strong growth. But again, it comes down to global supplies. So we'll see, what the market trends are there for next year. I say the most interesting one that we hear about and there's a lot of work on is the smaller acreage crops, something like lupins or faba beans. Faba beans, we just got access to Mexico. So that's a new market opportunity which could drive some growth there. And then lupins, there's lots of interest from a lupin standpoint in some of our export markets and the processors, high protein. So it's an exciting crop to see where it can go in the years to come. But there's definitely some growth potentials with some of those crops.
That was Greg Bartley from Pulse Canada in a recent Pulse School episode. Other news on Pulse front, India is reimposing tariffs on pea imports. The country's Minister of Finance published a notification on October 29th of a 30% tariff on yellow peas with a bill of lading dated on or after November 1st, which is today. So not good news. The full story there is at RealAgriculture.com. We'll be back with more of Real Ag on the Weekend right after this.
RiseAbsorb is redefining what growers expect from phosphate fertilizer. Backed by data and built for performance, RiseAbsorb helps reduce phosphorus losses, improve uptake, and boost ROI without increasing input costs. Join the next wave of growers switching to the next generation of phosphorus fertilizers by visiting phospholutions.com.
RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays will cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the RealAg Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
Ready to make more confident decisions on your farm? Our precision agronomists and financial experts provide tailored recommendations that align field performance with your business goals and deliver real financial results. Book your appointment today at mnp.ca.
This week in Toronto, Ontario was the Trust in Food Summit that is hosted by the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity. Here to talk about some of this year's market research that they presented at the meeting, Bern Tobin of Real Agriculture chatted with Ashley Bruner of the Canadian Centre for Food Integrity.
We've got a real change, a real move this year. Tell us about it. I mean, a real spike in confidence.
Certainly. We're seeing record highs when it comes to trust and confidence in the food system that we haven't seen since a similar spike observed in 2020 at the peak of COVID. So we're really seeing a rebounding of perceptions and pro-Canada sentiment.
Where do you think it's coming from? You mentioned it is pro-Canada. There's a lot of stuff happening south of the border with food and health regulation. Are Canadians looking outward and then looking inward and thinking about where their food's coming from?
I think that's exactly it to a certain extent. That's definitely a big piece of it. Kind of the defining ourselves as better, at least we're not American, we're in a better position, we have a strong food regulatory and safety system, and people recognize that, and we know that trust is lifted, and the cornerstone to public trust is food safety. So the more people feel safe and secure with our food safety and food regulation systems, the better, and we see that spike in trust. Additionally, last year was a bit of a low point, so we had a lot of room to grow, and we rebounded, and not just back to kind of averages, but some really high highs, which does indicate kind of external forces, kind of those international U.S. pressures.
Just talk about those numbers. Up 14% at 45% of people feeling positive about the system.
Exactly. So this is great news. The year before, we saw some record lows, like 3 in 10 thought the food system was headed in the right direction. And at that time, people were almost equally likely to think things were headed in the wrong direction. So it was very polarized. This year, people are twice as likely to think things are headed in the right direction. So we're really, really feeling far more positive than last year, and it's something to be proud of and to build off of.
I want to talk a little bit about momentum and where this goes. But before that, I want to dig into a lot of the statistics, so much to unpack here. Let's talk about the knowledge of farming. It's flat, but I think, you said Canadians really do want to learn more.
You're right. We asked how knowledgeable people are about Canadian farming, and like we saw a few years ago when we ran it, about 90% of people don't know much, which isn't surprising, maybe isn't the best news, but we ask, are you interested in learning more? Over 6 in 10 want to learn more. Interest is particularly spiked among younger cohorts. So even though that knowledge base hasn't grown significantly over the past few years, the potential and willingness is there, and a great opportunity.
Let's talk about trust here. You always measure the stakeholders that are the most trusted by Canadians. Seen a significant move here, a bump up for scientists.
Yes, we have scientists reaching the top of the most trusted stakeholders in Canada's food system. It's not by much, a couple points above farmers, who are historically the most trusted group. But this is a bit of a surprise. Scientists have never been at the top. We're seeing some pretty anti-science rhetoric down south. So this was almost a surprise, but a reassuring good news that Canadians value facts, they value science, and of course, they value farmers, who are those credible messengers to carry the message.
Want to hit a few more data points. You really do run the gamut of across, the food landscape and the Canadian landscape. Tracking the concerns of consumers, still at the top of the list is the cost of food.
Yes, cost of food remains at the top of what Canadians are most worried about in their day-to-day lives. That has been a universal truth in our research for the past 10 years almost. But with the tracking, we're able to kind of pay attention to the level of concern and what's happening there. So we're seeing a bit of a softening of concern in terms of cost of food. But other concerns are also softening, aside from growing worry about political pressure and events of the world. So that's the really big shadow overcasting the top worries of Canadians.
One thing I've watched for years, and that is, confidence in Canada's food inspection system. Always a challenge, always a lot of questions. You're seeing some strength there.
Yes, we saw a very significant improvement in terms of Canadians feeling that our food inspection system ensures the safety of our food. And again, which is fantastic news for our food system as threats emerge in terms of eroding trust or faith in the trust of food safety in other countries. We are secure in knowing that within Canada, your food is safe. That is just table stakes for public trust.
You also looked at Canadian farmers. Are they good stewards of the environment? And that's rising. Does that create some opportunities?
It certainly does. We saw a weakening of that perception last year, and that worried me because our farmers are our most trusted stakeholders. They're who people believe and want to connect with. So any movement last year, it was a bit worrying. So this rebounding is really a good sign in terms of health of public trust and connecting with farmers and trusting them to take care of the land that they're working on for us and future generations.
You dig into a lot of aspects of consumers' perceptions and what they do and how they buy their food. Fact-checking. And fact-checking, claims so much food, misinformation out there. Your research shows that 58% of Canadians never fact-check confusing information. What do we take from that? I
was happy people were honest, I think. That I was a little surprised that, yes, 58, but the majority of Canadians say they never or only sometimes fact check alarming and confusing information, and we use that language to see if maybe that would push them to double check a bit more. And no, so we have an honest population, but so now it's on us. Knowing that that's the case, we need to encourage and teach people how to fact check.
Let's double back to the big question here, and that is, the overall tone of this report and the information here. Ashley, momentum. It's been a downward slide for a number of years. This is a spike upward. Talk about, I guess, what we need to do to maintain this momentum and drive it forward.
Yes, we're seeing this surge, this spike in pride and confidence in our food system, but our tracking research, by running some of these core questions every year, we're able to see how things have shook out in years past. During COVID, we saw a similar spike, a surge of confidence and trust in the food system. That was not maintained. We saw year after year leading to kind of a spiraling of trust. So this year, we really see it as an opportunity to take this moment and not let it just be a moment, to build the momentum, to really come together to tell our story. We are in a very strong position right now with an open and trusting audience. So we really need to leverage this momentum to entrench Canada's food system into the national identity.
If you want to find out more about that market research, you can find the link to the study and the full interview there with Ashley by going to RealAgriculture.com. We're back with more right after this quick break.
For balanced nutrition with micronutrients, the best answer is Wolftrax DDP from Koch Agronomic Services. To learn how Wolftrax can ensure nutrient availability through a crop's growth cycle, visit wolftrax.ca.
I'm Lindsay Smith, host of The Agronomist, and I want to thank you for tuning in for over 200 episodes of our beloved little program. Join me Monday nights, 8 p.m. Eastern on YouTube for our live and interactive agronomy Q&A. Each week, our guest panel will handle some of your toughest agronomic questions live, streaming on YouTube, Facebook, X, and RealAgriculture.com. Tune in Monday nights or go to realagriculture.com/agronomist and sign up for our email notifications and don't miss an episode.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is a video series that showcases the latest in canola research and production agronomy. Learn from some of the best at your own pace through quick and timely producer-focused videos available on our YouTube channel. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is the quickest way to keep up to date on all the latest in canola production. Boost your canola IQ with the Canola School, brought to you by BASF, and visit canolaschool.com.
A big time sign that, hey, it is fall, everybody. If the calendar wasn't a sign that says November 1st and 2nd, the first weekend of November, what should be is the fact that it's AgriTrade this upcoming week in Red Deer, Alberta. It is one of the big winter farm shows that prairie farmers take part in. It's kind of the launch of the new cropping season, I think, for a good part of the prairies. And recently, Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture had a chance to chat with Krissy Fiddler from AgriTrade.
So this year's show kicks off actually next week. It's November 5th to 7th at Westerner Park in Red Deer, Alberta.
Okay, and now, what is new? Because this is one of those events that I know so many people look forward to every single year. It sort of kicks off the, trade show season, conference season, especially in Alberta. What can participants look forward to this year that's maybe new?
Yeah, for sure. So if you haven't been there before, AgriTrade, it's known for being the right show, right time, right location. So it is a primarily equipment expo and covers all of agriculture. We take over all of Westerner Park, every building that we can, and it's kind of our kickoff to the new season. So right show, right location. We're right in the heart of some of the most productive farmland area in Alberta, and right in between two of our major cities in Alberta. And we really, it is known for the celebration after harvest. So everybody knows what's in the bins. They haven't seen their neighbors for a while. So this is the time to kick some tires, show some camaraderie with the neighbors, and really learn from the experts that are there with all of the products at AgriTrade.
All right.
So anybody that hasn't been there before, anybody that has been there before, we definitely have some new things and some fan favorites. Last year we incorporated Billy Bob's Bar, which is a nostalgic place if anybody has ever been to AgriTrade. And we've got some live music by Cole Martin there every afternoon. We have a lot of product launches. That's one of the main things that AgriTrade is known for. It's the kickoff to that new season. You're already looking forward to planting season 2026. And so our exhibitors do a fantastic job of launching their products at the show. They bring in their specialists. Anything that you had with troubleshooting during harvest, these guys are the ones that you want to talk to make sure while it's still fresh in your mind.
So you did mention, of course, we are on the eve here. So I would imagine with only a few days left to go, there are a lot of puzzle pieces coming together. So how does it all shape up in this next week?
For sure. So this week, the equipment actually starts to come onto the grounds. So starting this week, our team is prepping and getting ready for staging of all the equipment. It's always a sight to see when everything starts showing up and it's all in one area before it actually goes into the buildings. And so like we said, the ice is coming out of the Centrium for the Rebels are done playing, and we literally do. We take over every square inch of Westerner Park, and that includes outside. And this year, we are going to be the largest ever outdoor exhibit space that we've ever had. Thank you to that 14-day forecast. Appreciate that. Let's hope it stays where it is. But we've got some new demos happening out there. Make sure to bring your jacket, even if it's a light one. It's going to be beautiful weather, and those outdoor exhibitors are so excited this year.
Okay, so that, of course, brings us to the crux of this, in that for those maybe who haven't been in a while and definitely want to make it, or are new to it, or even those who go every single year, it's always a good reminder on where you can get more information, get your tickets, get lined up, and get ready for AgriTrade.
Yeah, for sure. So show guides should be hitting your guys' doorsteps this week if you haven't seen them there before. We really encourage everybody to get their tickets online prior to. It's a discounted ticket, and you skip the lines. If anybody's been there before, lineups can be big there. If you have your ticket online, you get in there with a $5 discount. It's only $15 online. It's $20 at the gate. Make sure you get them in advance at our website at www.agra-trade.com.
All right, agritrade.com. Save some money and skip the lines. This is very important. I don't stand in lines. It drives me bonkers. So that is always good advice. Okay, Krissy, thank you so much for joining me here on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much for having us, Lindsay. Take care.
That is Krissy Fiddler of AgriTrade joining my colleague at Real Agriculture, Lindsay Smith, talking about the event that's coming up here this upcoming week. And the weather looks not too bad. So, yeah, make the drive, everybody. Make the drive. You know, one thing that happened early Friday morning, China time, or I guess late Thursday night in Canada, is Prime Minister Mark Carney was able to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Now, this is 24 hours post President Trump meeting with the Chinese leader, and a little bit different results, maybe same outcomes. That I don't know if we should necessarily judge right off the hop. The U.S. side, as expected, came out of the meeting. We have a deal. Here's what they're going to do. Here's what's going to happen. Full promotion mode, right? And that's what we see a lot of times out of President Trump. On the Canadian side, it was a little bit more of like, hey, this is a restart on the relationship, and there was talk of Prime Minister Carney going to China to meet President Xi sometime in the spring. President Trump's meeting is going to be I think he's traveling to China, they said, in April. So kind of on sort of similar parallel paths. What we didn't hear was, well, they did promise, but Carney and Xi promised to really talk about trade, their teams going forward, which is good. And listen, as much as we want to believe the leaders are doing these negotiations, a lot of times it's the staff, it's the support, right? President Trump didn't negotiate the soybeans, right? People, the USTR did. Okay, so a lot of times we're kind of fooled by that a little bit, I think, or at least it's not as much about the leaders we sometimes pretend it to be. But I think from both aspects, for both countries, a positive in trying to refresh and get off on a little bit of a better foot with, one of the largest purchasers of ag commodities that there is in the world. That is China. Now, the question is, what happens with some of the tariffs that are in place from a Canadian perspective? They didn't agree to remove the EV tariffs from a Canadian perspective, and China hasn't done anything when it comes to the removal of the tariffs on things like Canadian pork, canola oil seed, meal, aquaculture products. So there's a lot at stake here. And although it may feel like one side got more done, or one side did worse, or one side did better in terms of the meetings with China, I think we should look at it 3 months from now, 6 months from now. Does China buy the amount of U.S. soybeans that the U.S. side is promising? What happens with Canadian exports of ag commodities to China in the next 6 months, in the next 12 months? Those are the things that we need to be paying very, very close attention to, because, listen, talking season is over. This is a concern for farmers, Farmers want to see action. Farmers want to see results. Less talking season and more focus on the action and the outcome, I think, is really important. But definitely a positive meeting for both countries, indeed. Send me any of your feedback to shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks for joining us here for Real Ag on the Weekend. We'll talk again next week.